Hey Wargamers, Mike here with Epic Duck Studios, and today I'm going to be working on Tentacles for the Guild Ball Fisherman's team. This is part one of a two-part series, and in this video I'm going to focus primarily on base coating the model using wet blending techniques. I'm going to be using an array of different Vallejo game color paints here. My intent is for the octopus to be red in the middle and fade to blue along the tentacles. To accomplish that, I'm going to be using game color Gory Red, Hexed Lichen, Dark Blue, Magic Blue, and finally Electric Blue, with a little bit of Moro White and later Warlord Purple, just to get some extra highlights in. I'm getting all these colors ready on my wet palette, and you're going to see I apply them a little bit differently than you're used to seeing. I'm going to be working basically straight from the wet palette, with very little thinning done, and applying the paints rather thickly to the model in sort of disparate bands, and then I'll be using a brush to blend them together. This is known as meet in the middle wet blending. The idea is that by depositing a kind of thicker coat of paint on the model, it stays wet longer and you have time to push it around and blend it with the color beside it. Because Tentacles has 8 tentacles, this is going to be a little bit repetitive, so I'm just going to show you the first 2. So I'm starting by applying Hexed Lichen, so that's the fairly dark purple, up near the body. I'm making sure to work my way all the way around the tentacle so that it's completely covered. I'm then coming in beside it with the dark blue, leaving a short band of bare primer between the two colors. This is the area where the meet in the middle will happen and the two colors will blend into each other. Next, I've picked up the Magic Blue and I'm painting most of the end of the tentacle with it, again leaving a short band of unpainted miniature. So now the wet blending magic happens. At this point I've got all the paint off the brush and I'm basically pushing the blue up into the purple and then dragging the purple back just a little bit so that the two colors start to literally wet blend on the miniature. Wet blending is literally the paints basically mixing together because they're two different liquids on the surface. Now you do help it out with the brush by pushing them back and forth. And here you can see I'm doing the same thing again with the Magic Blue back into the Dark Blue. I don't use wet blending as a technique that often. I tend more towards glazing and layering, but especially for doing sort of multicolor base coats like this, it's a really great way to push the colors together. Now at this point, I'm not finding that I really like the fade between the blue and the purple. My brush is mostly loaded with blue, so I'm going to pick up just a little bit of purple and kind of come back in between the two colors with a blue-purple mix and just push that back and forth just to kind of hit an in-between shade that the wet blending itself didn't quite give me. I'm now going to fade the end of the tentacle using a little bit of electric blue. At this point I'm not really wet blending because the rest of the paint on the tentacle is pretty dry, but what I am doing is pulling the paint from sort of up the tentacle a little bit towards the end, so it tends to be thicker towards the end, which is a different method of blending and doesn't always work depending on what kind of paints you're working with, but with the Vallejo game color it seems to work quite well. Because I am painting using a wet palette, my paint does stay a little more moist and does pick up a little bit of water, so it does naturally blend just a little bit easier than if you were to use this off of, say, a traditional plastic palette, an empty blister pack, or anything like that. So here I'm getting a little bit of Warlord Purple ready. I didn't actually film this earlier, so you didn't get to see the bottle, but you get an idea what color it is. What I'm using this for is to brighten up the purple nearest the body so that it's going to fade easier into the red afterwards. It's basically the interim step between purple and red that I just forgot to dispense earlier in the video. Vallejo game color Warlord Purple is also a fairly translucent color. It's a really good color to do blends with because it does allow some of the color underneath to show through. So in this case, it's really just sort of tinting the purple above it. If you've watched me painting my Reaper Mouselings or any other models where I've done a lot of purple, I almost always use this color over deeper purple, and it blends on its own with almost no help. So I'm going to go ahead now and repeat the process on the second tentacle. I'm going to paint the one in the middle of the model, the one basically coming out of where his nose would be in a human face. because this is the longest tentacle on it, so it's the easiest one to demonstrate everything on. In reality, I probably should have painted that one first. So again, I'm just beginning by applying a thick band of hexed lichen, so that's the dark purple. And then I'm going to come in with a thick band of dark blue beside it. There's a few little details on this tentacle. There's basically some facial piercings that this octopus has, because that's a thing. Anyway, they're in the way a little bit as far as the blending goes, but it's not too bad, because I can basically just blend over them and come back and paint those later. So you can see with this tentacle, I'm approaching it just a little bit differently. I'm not leaving that band in the middle to blend with. I'm basically just running the dark blue right up onto the purple. I'm not really overlapping them much, I'm just not leaving an empty space in between. And I'll still come in and do the wet blend as if there was a meat in the middle, but the meat in the middle is instead going to be an overlap between the purple and the blue. You can see that on the inside of the tentacle, the blue went on just a little bit thinly. It's a little bit transparent, so I'm going to just come in and just touch up the base coat here. Now I'm coming in with the magic blue and painting the next band. I am going to leave a gap between the magic blue and the dark blue because I did find that those two colors blended together quite easily using the meat in the middle method. So I'm going to continue using it as I work my way around the model. Some paints simply play better together than others do, and you can kind of learn which ones will blend easier, which ones are more translucent. Just with experience, as you do techniques like this, you'll find sometimes they just don't work. You need to come in, do some glazing in between or some meat in the middle mixing. Whatever it takes to get there, you just sort of build that experience up over time. And in this case, I found that the two blues do blend together really well, but the purple and the blue needed a little bit of help, so I'm using different methods for the different colors. Now I'm going to come in with electric blue on the end of the tentacle. Again, I'm not going to really bother with meat in the middle, mostly because it's just such a small area. There's not a lot of middle to meat in. So I'm going to start by overlapping the magic blue with the electric blue and just pulling it towards the end of the tentacle. Now to clean the blend up a little bit, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the magic blue again on my brush. Just a tiny amount and kind of push it in between the two colors. It's very thin at this point because it's picked up some water from the wet palette, and I'm just kind of using it. I literally picked up just a tiny bit from the edge of the blob where it's picked up the most water. So I'm kind of just glazing at this point with this color. Now that I'm happy with the blues, I'm going to come back in with a little bit of the Warlord Purple, and again just brighten up the purple nearest the core of the octopus's body. I'm going to paint the next 6 tentacles off camera so you don't have to watch the whole thing, and then I'm going to move on to painting his body. So I'm going to start painting the body by base coating literally all of it with gory red, including the net he has across the back of his head, because literally every part that's not the raised net surface should be still the red flesh underneath showing through. You can see near the tentacle here, I am pushing the color sort of back over the purple a little bit. The red paint is a little bit on the translucent side, so it does allow for some sort of free glazing back and forth between the two colors, and this really helps me get a nice blend without having to resort to wet blending or picking up more purple right now. This front tentacle is the only one I'm really concerned about blending the purple to the red with, because there's sort of the way the model is sculpted, all the other tentacles are kind of separate from the core of the body, but this one is almost like a proboscis. It tends to come off the front of the octopus, almost like a long nose, and because of that I want the transition to be really nice and smooth. The rest of the red is pretty much just boring, regular base coat work, so I'm going to skip a lot of it to the end here. I should probably mention that base coating over these really heavily textured areas like this net can kind of be hell on your brush. You can see the bristles of mine are starting to splay. If you can use an older or cheaper brush, please do so. So now to help blend the tentacles back to the main body, I'm going to pick up the Warlord Purple again. This is the very translucent, brighter of the purples, and work it back up onto the red just a little bit near the tentacles. I'm also adding a little bit more of it to the tentacles themselves because it does make them just a bit more reddish than the regular purple did. Next, I'm going to use some Khador Red base from P3 to brighten up the red. This is probably my all-time favorite red paint. It's a little bit on the translucent side, but is super vibrant and just very heavily pigmented. It will just tint almost anything it touches pure red, and I think it really should be in everyone's toolbox. So you can see I'm just haphazardly applying it more or less to the entire top of the miniature, letting the different raised details grab the paint and just work with it. Now I'm just going to repeat the process for a second pass just to brighten it up even further. With the general red highlight done, I'm going to selectively highlight some areas, mostly just his eyebrows. To apply some more drastic highlights to the red, I'm going to be using Citadel, Averland Sunset, and Yokero Orange. These are very pigmented orange and yellow paints, more of like a mustardy yellow. They'll build up really well on top of the red though, and blend back if I need them to nicely. I'm going to start by roughing in my highlights with the Averland Sunset, so that's the yellow of the two. And then if I find that they need to be blended back, I'll use the orange as the intermediary color. I'm going to be focusing this on the details that I want to stand out the most. That's going to be the eyebrow, eyelids, and the sort of crest of spikes going up the middle of his head. Also, the octopus has some gills on both sides of his head, and I'm going to brighten them up as well. So with the Averland Sunset highlights done, I'm going to come in now with the Okero Orange to fill in between the red and the yellow. There's a couple of spots where I didn't find the transition from red to orange was nice enough, so I'm going to come back in with just a little bit of red paint and just feather the edge of that orange blend. Now I'm going to take a couple of those highlights right to the extreme and use a little bit of Moro white just to really brighten them up. Finally, I'm going to go back to the dark blue I started with and just use this to base coat his eyes. Now, in the next video, I'm going to spend a lot of time really detailing his eyes because I want them to really stand out. They're large and there's a lot of working space on them, which makes them a great way to practice doing really cool detailed eyes. And octopuses just have really unique eye structures, so I want to kind of do something. So for now, I'm just finishing the base coat, but if you come back for part 2, I'm going to do something really awesome with these eyeballs. Promise. Alright, that's it for Tentacles base coating. So I'm going to come back in a second part of this video and paint all the different details, the hooks, the nets, the suction cups, the rock he's standing on, and most importantly his eyeballs. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, do something epic.